I just want to say, just to start with, that if it wasn't for people like Don Davenport, people like Mark and I are in elected office. So thank you for everything that you did. And if it's not for people like Delegate Levine, then people like Delegate Levine and I aren't in office. Because that's the thing. I think what you just heard from his story here is that no matter what the odds are, you have to learn at some point that you cannot live in a world of doubt when you know that there is certainty. And one of the things that you learn from transitioning in particular is that you have to confront fear. And when you do confront fear, you don't necessarily know what's going to be on the other side of it, but you know the path that you're on is unsustainable, and that you would rather confront that uncertainty than live another day on a path that is not meant for you in the first place. And I was asked in an interview a few weeks ago if I could have said something to the people at Stonewall 50 years ago about what they were doing and what it would mean for the future and everything. What would you say? I said, I wouldn't say anything. I would say nothing, because they had that uncertainty. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know how badly they would be beaten. They didn't know what was going to be on the other side of jail. They didn't know whether they would make it out that night. They didn't know whether they were going to be sent back to Richmond with their parents. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know that this would spark a nationwide movement. What they did know was that having their sanctuary raided, having to have secret lives, double lives, and having to live in a society where it's okay for other people to be themselves, for the majority of people to be themselves, but it's not okay for you to be yourself, and that you need to acquiesce and you need to act like them even though that's not germane to who you are. They took that, they confronted that. They confronted that reality, and they said, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not taking it anymore. It's time to fight back. And they did. And 50 years later, everything's not perfect. 50 years later, we still have a lot of work left to do. We have a lot that's still ahead of us. And we're seeing right now in some areas, regression. Our job at this point is to never ever give in to the nihilism, to the fear, the loathing, hatred, anger, misunderstood rhetoric, or anything that is inherently meant to single out and stigmatize people because of who we are. We have to stay the optimist. We have to stay the altruist. We have to stay the idealist. We have to stay the people who understand reality, and at the same time, when we see something that should be and isn't there, we say, what do I have to do to make it happen? That's where we have to be. Because if we don't, who will? If we don't dream, like Don did, just to get up to New York in the first place, how could you have ever been you back home? If you didn't fight like Mark did, how could you have ever eventually prevailed in your rights when you knew up front you might not have won, but that it was a long-term strategy to get somewhere so that one day you could celebrate that victory? And if it wasn't for someone like Diane being able to confront her own fear in school, in life, and trying to reconcile two of the most difficult things that you can possibly do as an LGBTQ person of faith, which is between who you know who you are and who you believe you are called to be, and trying to bring those together, trying to provide that bridge, trying to bridge that gap, and saying, how can I reconcile one with the other when I've been told my whole life that it's not supposed to be? And then you remember a phrase from St. Francis de Sales of be who you are and be that well. And if there's anything that you learned in 13 years of Catholic school, like I did, it's two things. Number one, that quote from St. Francis de Sales, be who you are and be that well. And number two, conversion therapy does not work. And I think for a modern generation, I'm 34, I'll turn 35 later this year. I grew up at the tail end of the AIDS crisis, when I knew it was a thing, but I was too young to really understand the totality of it. But I knew it exists. I was old enough to know and see blatant homophobia, but to see it as it was regular, it was normal. And to see it right before my eyes as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, going on hunting trips over into Winchester and seeing people with homophobic slurs written on their t-shirts. I mean, it was really, really out. But at the same time, I wasn't old enough to even begin to feel comfortable around someone to say, hey, that sounds wrong. Even though, even at that age, I knew who I was. I knew who I was at that point, but I was far too afraid to tell anyone because there was no one else like me. One of the, at least in my area, and the elected politicians in the greater Prince William area, keep in mind, I'm a lifer from Prince William County, Portia Manassas, born in Prince William Hospital in 1984, lived there my whole life. When I was growing up there, the best we could hope for a politician was just to simply not be hostile. They were never going to vote for us. The best we could hope for was that they just wouldn't aggressively single us out. And unfortunately, that was not reality for a lot. My predecessor was in office from the time I was 7 years old until I was 33. Grew up in the same church, baptized and confirmed, same church. I went to All Saints Catholic School from 4th grade to 8th grade, Paul VI Catholic High School from 9th grade through 12th grade, where I got my diploma. I went to St. Bonaventure University in Western New York. The first 9 years of that Catholic school experience was not by choice. The last were. But when I look at it in its totality, I think, yeah, I do know what it means to live with that fear that Don did, even if he was more bold at 17 than I was, even though his plan required a lot more hope in and uncertainty than mine did, which was go to college, hopefully no one I knew back home would be there, and then try testing the grounds of coming out. And there's one person from your high school who was there. Guess that plan got upended. And so then it became a lot of very small steps of telling some women who I knew, who were my closest friends. And it would just be very incremental, very, very, very. But I won't even tell your boyfriends because I'll ruin my friendships with them. I'm afraid. I don't want to be seen, and because this was before I transitioned, I didn't want to be seen as the gay guy. I wanted to be funny. I wanted to be the metalhead. I wanted to be the reporter. I wanted to be all these other identifiers that didn't have the negative connotation of the stigma of the stereotype that gay guy did, even though that wasn't even my actual reality. This is who I am. And one of the funny things about going to gay clubs as a trans woman for the better part of a decade is that you go, wow, honey, so you're a trans woman, you want to date men, you're going to gay clubs where there are gay men who like men. Girl, you ain't men. Oh, really? It took me 12 years to figure out. How come this isn't working? But at the same time, I could go there and be safe. I could go there and have a reasonable expectation that I would walk out the same door that I entered in under my own power and under my own free will. I'm not saying everything that happened at LGBTQ clubs was perfect or was even kind. It wasn't. But it was a lot better than me presenting as her and getting, quote, clocked, which is a phrase that we use in the trans community especially, at a straight club. And here's the thing, at a gay club, to be yourself, it's okay. No one's gonna jump you for finding out that you're a trans woman, and that's okay. But you're playing with fire when you go to straight clubs like that. And that's the thing, because you don't know what's gonna happen there. And I've been on both sides of that, and I know what it's like to walk through the parking lot with my hair covering my face because I was so afraid anyone would see me and recognize me, even though then I had to wonder, why would I be afraid of someone else being in the same area that I was? Wouldn't that mean that they were going through the same stuff I am? Well, I don't know. But I had that fear for a long time. And I know what it's like to sit on the counter in my bathroom in front of a mirror with a pair of tweezers. And even to this day, I still carry them around because even after 12 rounds of facial laser hair removal, it's 90%. It's not perfect. And I would go like this, and I would pluck every single hair from my face for 4.5 to 5 hours. Piece by piece by piece by piece by piece, because if I were to shave, it would get the 5 o'clock shadow. If I were to wax, it would bleed. If something else were to happen, it would just be uncomfortable. This was the best that I had, just to feel like her for 2 hours. And maybe, you know what? Make it 4 hours. 1 hour drive up from Manassas into DC, 2 hours where you can just dance and be yourself, and another hour driving home. And this is what I had to show for it, a pair of tweezers. But why would you do that? Why go through all that? And you did so infrequently. You're going out like once a quarter, once every few months. Yeah, if I didn't have those quarters, if I didn't have those months, what would I have had? It would have just been no outlet of expression. It would have just been sadness all the time, instead of giving me a little something to hope for, a little something to be eager to experience, a little something ahead where you can go, you know, if I can just get through the next few weeks, I can get out there again. And it didn't mean that you're going to go home with someone else. There's been exactly 0 times in my life that I've either been picked up or picked up someone else at a bar and ended up going home with that person. That's just never been my reality. Instead, the other side of the table can have different life experiences. And that's and we celebrate that diversity within our community. But that's because I was what you would call a loser, you see. But the thing is, I would go and try to beat me at these clubs, and I would still feel incomplete, because looks like one of the things that you learn as a trans woman who transitions, not in your teens or younger, but in adulthood, is you get really good at learning how to change your clothes in your car or wherever else it is that you're going, because in front of one group of people, you're expressing yourself as this, but these other group of people can't see you as this, so you have to express yourself as this. And that was a constant in my life for the better part of 20 years. It gets tiresome. Really, really, really tiresome. And there gets to be a point where you just say, I don't want to keep living like this anymore. And I had a breaking point where in 2012, my band had gone to the UK to go do a tour, and I had spent all year I was working 2 full-time jobs. We go out, we do this amazing tour in Scotland, Northern Ireland. I'm the one who puts everything together, because of course I did. And not like when you got ambition or if you do anything with it. But I remember just being overseas, and it was just basically like, okay, this is the last hurrah that I'm going to do before I start going in to see a psychologist, before I start doing something, because I can't keep living like this. At this point, I was 27, turning 28 later that year. Can't keep doing this. I'm getting too old for this. I do not want to go into my 30s still pretending to be someone else, because that's the thing about being when you're fronting a heavy metal band and you're touring internationally, you're touring, regionally, or doing whatever, and I would still feel the same way. It doesn't matter how hard I rocked, how much I partied, or anything like that, how much I was the center of attention. I still feel the same way every night. How come I'm not her yet? And I would wake up this next morning, how come I'm not her yet? When inside I knew I was always her to begin with, and yet I could never express it. And I could never feel that I was going to be safe enough, and I would lose my guy friends over it. Well, a couple things happened. I decided after the 2012 election, because I was a reporter, I was working 2 journalism jobs. As soon as that goes over, all right, I'm going to go see a psychologist in Fairfax who specializes in transition-related health, transition-related, just psychology. So I did that. And then early 2013, I go see an endocrinologist, Like, okay, yeah, everything's checking out. You can start, hormone replacement therapy. I said, all right, I'm going to do that, but I want to go through facial laser hair removal first. Okay, whatever. It made sense at the time. I'm not going to try to rationalize it now. It worked at the time. So I was going through that, and I'm basically making all my check marks at this point. Just being like, all right, you're certain this is what you want to do? Yes. This is everything? Yep. And I'm checking everything. That summer I go to Italy, and that's my ancestral heritage area. And I was in Rome at the Colosseum that summer with a good buddy of mine. And it was a hot, really just warm day, and all these women out who are walking around have just the most beautiful sundresses, the most beautiful, just, freedom of expression that you could have. They were just walking around being themselves and expressing themselves with the feminine beauty and grace that, they chose to, express to the world. And here I am in a pair of cargo pants and an oversized, tour t-shirt, and I lost it. I was in the Coliseum, and I just asked my buddy Nick. I was just like, "Hey man, I'm just gonna go over here and go to the gift shop or whatever I was doing." And I just went into the corner and just sobbed. I was just I had finally reached this point of like, I can't live like this anymore. I know I'm going through laser. I know I'm going to start HRT. I know this, but right now I feel like my insides are caving into themselves. I can't keep doing this. Why am I wearing this? Why am I doing this? How come I can't even tell one of my best friends? How come I can't do this? That was the point that I was getting at. And we took a picture together, and that picture, I was morose. Just, I could see it I could see it to this day. You don't get to see it. But I know where that photo is. That's why we used to print them out. Yeah, that's what I said. You don't get to see it. But, I look at that, and I couldn't live like that anymore. And so finally, I got my transition underway that fall. And I didn't tell my mom, didn't tell my family. I only told some of my closest, girlfriends that I was doing that. And then eventually it's going to become pretty freaking obvious. So going into 2014, I was like, okay. And the funny thing is, after the Italy trip, next time I saw my psychologist, I explained what happened, and she was, "Oh, now you know. You're ready." I was like, fair point. And just to fast forward, 2014 comes, and by that fall, I'm out on my job. I've got one job where I'm presenting as female full-time, and then I have to go into the car, change clothes or wash makeup or whatever, and then go to my newspaper job, go cover sports game or go cover town council or whatever it was that evening. And it was just like, wow, is that exhausting, having to constantly do that every day. And so here I am, really super happy at this office job in the morning, but then I am also, I'm not going to wear guy clothes. I'm going to just wear femme-ambiguous clothes where it's like a cap sleeve, scoop neck shirt, and the fluffy yoga pants, the flowy yoga pants as opposed to the super tight ones. And yeah, my shoes have little pink stripes on them, whatever. And then it got to a point where, the people I'm interviewing, and when I approach someone for an interview, they're saying, "Yes, ma'am, yes." And I'm, oh, that feels really right. Yes. No, I'm not going to correct you because you are correct. Yes, this is good. And it was just like, yeah, that should be my normal. And one of the funny things is that you'll find out in trans world is your first couple times where you're expressing yourself for who you are. You go out, and then someone correctly genders you for the first time in your life. And this spark that just shoots up inside you of it's something that everyone else in the world will take for granted, unless you're the trans person. You will never know what that is like. You will never know what that is like unless you've experienced it. And you go, and you just clutch yourself for a moment and you go, that feels right, because it is right, because you've been acknowledged for you, and you've been acknowledged in a genuine way. And it's not just because someone's being nice to you, it's because they're seeing you as you. And that's the ultimate goal. It's not to be stealth. It's not, ha, I fooled you. No, someone told me that before, like, you're not fooling anyone. I was like, yeah, I know, I did that for 30 years. Now I'm me. Now I get to be me every single day. And as I get to be me, I recognize that the next generation that's coming after me, they want to be themselves too. And when I was in Salem in southwest Virginia, Mark heard me told a longer version of the story yesterday. This little 15-year-old trans girl comes up to me and she says, I've never met another trans girl before. I said, oh, well, hi, I'm Danica, you might know who I am. And we talked for a minute and she goes, can you be my mentor? It's like, oh, honey, I live 4.5 hours from you. I live 200 miles away. I can't be that day-to-day presence in your life. But there's some really amazing people at the Ladies and Gents of the Blue Ridge over in Roanoke who can. And the thing is, they have a lot to teach you, and you have a lot to teach them, because you're never too old to learn, you're never too young to teach. And for them to be able to establish a sense of community in Southwest Virginia, that is a greater gift than anything I can give them from Manassas. And when I think back about how this is all possible, just to put a fine point on everything, and then I guess we'll turn it over. After my election, I had never been to the Castro district. It seems like that's where you're supposed to go at some point in LGBTQ world, right? We're all supposed to go, right? So I had never been, so I went. So I went after the 2017 campaign, and I'm walking through the city with a then San Francisco supervisor, and I did this meet and greet with a bunch of folks for a while. It was a 2-hour rope line. Good God, that election was popular, and so at the end, I meet this guy, and he's probably about next age, and he comes up and he extends his hands out like this, and he's shaking his hands. I said, "Hi, I'm Danica. Nice to meet you." He goes, "These hands touched Harvey Mills," and you know, it's just, it throws you back for a quick second. You go, oh my God. And you go, okay. You know, this is super real. And if you go to the museum, where there's a cute little exhibit of me there too right now, which is super cool for their Stonewall Rise Up thing. Next to it is the glass where you can see the letter that Harvey had folded in his suit jacket the day he was shot and killed. And you see the hole that went through one side of it and came out the other side. That's there behind glass, and I would strongly encourage you to go and look at that, just to really take in what it means to have been out before it was safe. And by the way, it's still not perfectly safe. There are still trans women of color across the country and around the world who are routinely, brutally murdered, and I know that because I had to cover that in Montgomery County on 2 occasions as a reporter. I'll never forget for all of my days the voice of Kenny Lynn, who was the father of Kiana Blakeney, crying to me 6 months after his daughter was killed, that April of 2016, later that year, crying to me on the phone, I miss my baby girl. I said, no, the world's not safe yet. It's not. But by being vulnerable enough to be visible in the first place, we are making it safer. We are making that imperfect union that we have a little more perfect. We are taking the idea that you can be who you are, you can be that well, and no matter what you look like, where you come from, how you worship if you do, or who you love, that you can be welcomed, celebrated, respected, and protected because of who you are, not despite it, and not for what other people tell you you're supposed to be. You be you, and especially for the young folks up front, you be you better than anyone else ever could, because you're the only person who could ever be you. Thank you.